How would you feel if people arrested for domestic violence had to register like sex offenders do? Arrested doesn't mean convicted. Surely you meant convicted, right? Oh, yeah, I meant convicted. I caught a DV charge for beating up my stepdad after he beat my handicapped mother. Luckily for me, the charge was reduced, but not everyone who gets that charge is a woman beater. It basically ruined my life at the time, and if I was treated like a sex offender on top of it all, I probably wouldn't have made it to today. Similar experience here. I was charged with aggravated domestic for allegedly beat my brother so bad he was hospitalized for 3 days. Sounds pretty awful, right? He came to my home with a pistol and his girlfriend while my wife was there alone. The GF came to record our interaction. He wanted me to attack him. He called me at work threatening me and my wife. I left work and spent 45 minutes begging, pleading, trying to reason with him that we were brothers and in this silliness he was upset about would all be a distant memory one day and that it wasn't worth tearing two brothers apart. I have no recollection of the events that followed. But I was arrested. Months later in court, we looked so stupid, two grown men of close age and stature, one asking for an order of protection. In hindsight, I should called the cops on him. But at the time I thought I could reason and keep the law out of a family matter. Oh well. I totally disagree with it. As a defense attorney, I've seen a lot of the registration system. It is already so flawed. There are so many people on it that absolutely should not have to register. Fun fact, you do not have to be convicted of a registrable offense to be required to register, at least in my state, which is a fairly liberal state. If you are charged with a crime that requires registration, and are found guilty of anything coming from that set of circumstances, you register. Even if found not guilty by a jury for that offense. And it is much easier than you would think to be charged with a registrable offense than you would think. The predatory offender lists are very watered down with non-predators. Once you register, it's incredibly difficult to turn your life around. No one will hire you, you can't go to college, and registration is complex, especially for poor, uneducated people, that violation incredibly likely, even if you're not actively avoiding registration. It's concerning to me how quickly people back the idea of you're never allowed back into society for X crime. There's no doubt we need to do something about repeat offenders, but with the US justice system in the horrific state it already is, more punitive measures are just as likely to harm the reformed as the unchanged. And yes, that's before the inevitable tough on crime campaign someone runs for office on, to expand this to dangerous people, which basically means even more ways to wind up on a list for life designed to keep you as an outcast, as you've already described. Heck, the entire concept if we think this person is so dangerous we put them on a list that it's your responsibility to check is just so flawed to begin with. Americans really like cultivating criminals and leaving societal problems to fester instead of proactively working to fix them. And mental health is at the head of this. A list like this is a key example of something that sounds great on paper, but would be absolutely horrible in practice. I want abusers gone too, I grew up with them, but a list is not the answer. The answer is attack the root of the problem, generational abuse and mental health problems. Said abuser I was with had issues with some stuff. Not all with issues are abusers, but most abusers have issues. But, the fix for that step in the chain, better mental health resources so abusers aren't made, is to spend a lot more money in taxes for better resources. And Americans don't want this. And that's where the bread meets the butter. Americans like leaving problems to fester because it's cheaper to do this as a country, and why care when money is power? I'm not American, but it seems everywhere that ex-cons are treated poorly and find it hard to get work, which drives them back to crime. I mean, once you get out, if someone offers you a criminal job for like a few hundred a job or some shitty job you looked for ages for duck all money, most people would go the first. American here, and yes, our system brands you for life. We don't rehabilitate, we punish, and after we punish, we ostracize, register, so once a person has done the time in prison, they aren't able to find housing or a job. So they do what they can to survive, which means they can only find minimum wage jobs, live in places where there is high crime, BC it's all they can afford, etc., which makes it easier to find trouble again and return to prison. Also, another sad fact, some of our prisons are owned by private corporations which make a shit ton of money, so why rehab people when they can come back and make them more money? We're America. The land of opportunity. But pathetically, we are not the land of second chances. Oh, and the land of the most incarcerated individuals. What prize do we get? And because of vast socioeconomic divide in our country, those who don't have money or any type of family situation that will support someone once they get out of prison to slowly regain a foothold back in normal society, they are absolutely screwed. It's sad and I'm not sure it will change in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. Every housing or job application I've ever encountered always has a "have you ever been convicted of a crime" question, and if you answer, you're pretty guaranteed to not get that job, house or apt. Only find min wage, even then they'll drive you away. That's a personal decision on the GM plus to allow a convict around young children. Typically that's a no. I had roommates who had gotten out and he was working construction under the table, and surprise surprise, 2 different bosses kept promising they would pay him and either never did or were always procrastinating it. So even if you find someone who will hire you, it doesn't mean they won't be taking advantage of you and not actually paying you. At the time he was on probation and mainly getting by because he was selling weed, not because of his construction job. I was so angry for him. It's not fixing the root cause. The root causes are well established. People stay out of fear, dependence on the abuser, inability to recognize abuse, disability, lack of resources, low self-esteem. Basically, you could end domestic abuse entirely if you empowered abusees financially and with mental health care. But mental health care is bananas expensive, and having to work 60 hours per week if you don't already to try and get back on your feet, or being homeless, is a huge disincentive. We live in a society that puts those people in the situation where they cannot seek help or get out because they lack the resources to do so, and until you fix that, everything else is a band-aid. I'm showing this to everyone who says I just don't understand why they stay with them when talking about another's situation. So well put. I used to be one of those people. One of the ones that said, "Why can't you just leave?" Until I was in an abusive relationship. I realized pretty quickly that it's not that simple. I still feel guilty forever judging people for staying in abusive relationships and not just leaving. It's hard to understand if you've never been in that situation. In my case, he told me he would kill me if I tried to leave, and I believed him. I received death threats daily when I did leave, and I'm sure he would have carried them out if he had the opportunity. I really think that a lot of what's needed is education. People need to be aware of resources they can use to get away from abusive spouses if needed, women's shelters, laws in their area, how to file a restraining order. Education about the cycle of abuse is also important. The sex offender registry has been a civil rights disaster. It's time for it to go, not to expand it. So I'd be totally opposed. Anytime you think you've got a group of people that is so bad you can do whatever you want of them, take a step back. I don't think this thread went the way Op expected it to. Not really. I think it's much needed discussion on a taboo subject. I think you're both right. Oi, this is Reddit, get out of here with that kind of talk. We only deal in witch hunts and heavily one-sided arguments here. I'm immediately suspicious of any initiative that has no other purpose besides publicizing bad things someone has done, or even just allegedly done, to make them a pariah. Because God knows if there's anything we needed more of, it's witch hunts. The law exists to curb mankind's shittier nature, not indulge it. Not a fan of the sex offender registry. The problem with systems like that is officials will always follow the law exactly. So the sex offender lists are filled with men who were 17 and banging their 16-year-old girlfriend. Today, they can't live near schools, and they get harassed by neighbors if they move into any neighborhood. Recently had a flyer in our mailbox about a neighbor being a dangerous sex offender. Looked up his past, 16 years old, making out with his girlfriend of the same age, now labeled for life. Neighbors all wanted him gone, even though most of them had sex at the same age. They won't listen to reason, and social media is exploding with outrage. So now imagine domestic violence. Woman strikes her husband, he hits back, he goes in registry. Invariably men, not women, go on these lists because they are the threat. I think being arrested, convicted, and serving your time is enough unless you killed someone. I don't see a need for us to brand people virtually or literally. Like it's a shit idea. The sex offender list is also a ducking stupid idea that's broken as hell. Half the people on it were minors fucking other minors who had pissed off parents and similar stupid shit that nobody should rightly care about but the people involved. Awful lot of people on that list for pissing on a dumpster, that sort of thing. Yay, piss anywhere within like 500 feet of a school, doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m., you're on the list. For many states, it's piss anywhere but a bathroom and you're put in the list if you're caught.